Hello everybody and welcome to our special webinar session today on the 5 pillars of improvisation mastery. All right, so we got a lot to cover. We're going to go for about 90 minutes today. If you need to bump off and do something else, not a problem. There is a recording. If you got an email today saying, giving you a link to this session, then you're going to get the recording. Like I said in the email, the recording will go out about 24 hours, but likely much sooner, right? So I'm going to try and get it out by the end of the day today, but if not, then first thing tomorrow morning. All right, so let's jump right in. We will have a Q&A time later, so if you have any questions, I will save some time at the end for some questions. All right, so first of all, for those of you who might not know me, my name is William Mayette. I've created Jazz Edge, many other sites as well. I've been teaching for over 35 years, and I've been teaching online for 25 years as well, believe it or not, all right? So Berklee College of Music grad, that's actually me right there, and the little arrows pointing there. I was in the catalog in 1995 or 6, something like that. But anyway, so that's a little bit about me, toured, written books, all that good stuff. All right, so the recording, like I said, will be sent out in about 24 hours. You could take your phone right now if you want and take scan that QR code, right, to go and fill out that form if you did not. So if you happen to be joining me on YouTube or somewhere and you did not fill out the form and you did not get any emails about this session, then you can go ahead and scan that QR code and then you will get the recordings as well. And then that's the address right down here as well. All right, so moving on. Let's talk a little bit about the workshop flow before we get into the nuts and bolts of what we're going to be doing today. So I'm going to begin with a brief description of each of the 5 pillars. Then I'm going to move into some action items. Now these are things that you could take away and you can you can think about. These are concepts, these are exercises, these are things that you can practice, right? So in each of the different pillars, I'm going to give you usually about 4 or 5 or so action items. I sent out a sheet via email. If you didn't get it, go back and check your email where just basically it's a nice little printed out sheet where you get little boxes where you could put little notes and whatnot for each of the different pillars if you want, okay? We're also, like I said, I'm going to be giving you examples, but don't get sidetracked if these examples are not exactly what you're hearing, if you don't dig the sound of them, and then dig, that's fancy jazz talk for like. So if you don't like the sound of these examples, instead, don't be micro-focused. Have that more 30,000 foot view and be kind of looking down and say, okay, I kind of see where he's going with this and I see how I can bring that into my own playing. Because when it comes to improvisation, I mean, sky's the limit. It could be everything from like kind of pretty piano to like really hard bop to, more pop rock, Latin, etc. Right? So don't get micro-focused on that. And then don't worry if you feel overwhelmed or underwhelmed, right? So if you're a beginner or advanced level player, I'm going to be covering concepts for both of you. But then also in the classes that I'm going to talk about at the end of the session that are going to be coming up later on in September, there's going to be both beginner and advanced level sessions. More on that a little bit later. All right, so I encourage you to turn on your video, okay? This is unlike a typical webinar in which, you're just off there and you see me, but I can't see you. I could see you right on my screen right there. So hello, everybody. There's too many of you to name everyone. Bert, Jody, Tom, Ross, Marilyn, Chris, Christine, Dang, Ron, Virgil, Thomas, Tina, Dom, Pete, Bud, Jim, Clyde. Like, if I didn't mention you, I know there's a bunch of you on. So thank you for taking time out of your day and joining me. And thank you for turning on your camera. It's just a great way of us engaging. You could see everyone else that's here learning. All right, so let's dig in. 5 pillars of improvisation mastery. So I came up with this session because, teaching for 35 years and playing, geez, I've been playing Been playing for 38 years. No, not 38 years. 48 years. Ugh, yikes. So I've been playing the piano a long time and improvising. And over that time, what I have learned and realized is these different techniques that really make it easier to learn improvisation. I'm going to later on talk about some of the emails that I got, some of the objections or friction points to improvisation, and I'll explain that later. But a lot of times, a lot of students feel there's a lot of emotion when it comes to improvisation, right? So this session is designed to give you some practical tools, but also just kind of like get rid of a lot of the junk that a lot of other teachers, a lot of other methods and books like to throw in. If you know me, you know that I like to try and simplify that stuff to make it easier for you. All right, so the first one is accompaniment. So now, when it comes to accompaniment, this is your bread and butter. This is like you need a strong, solid foundation accompaniment to improvise over. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention as well is please mute yourself as well. I'm going to click on here and just make sure that everyone is muted. But go ahead and just make sure that you're muted up until the Q&A time. That way we don't get any audio bleeding in. All right, so you need to have that strong foundation of accompaniment because everything that you're improvising is on top of that. Now, bear in mind when I talk about some of this stuff, know that I kind of boil this down a little bit, right? So, does it mean I'm only improvising with my right hand and I never do anything with my left hand? Of course, we know the answer is no on that. But that's at a much higher level when you get there, right? So at this more basic, intermediate, even beginner advanced level, you're typically going to be doing something in the left hand accompanying the right hand solo. Usually when we think improvisation, we think right hand, but just know that that's not always the case. All right, so that's accompaniment. Building a steady musical foundation so your right hand is free to create. All right, action items for this. So the first action item is that you must own your accompaniment, right? You can't be thinking about what's going on in the left hand if you're trying to improvise in the right hand. And let's just pause for a quick second here on someone might think of that and be like, oh yeah, that's fine, I got that. All right, you're the more advanced level. But if you're a beginner, this action item is a good point to know because if you are trying to sit down and improvise, right? Oh, I can't do it hands together. Well, I would say to you, well, you probably can't do it hands together because that left hand, you don't really own it yet. So what does it mean to own it? It means that you can play it at least 80% proficiency. Most of the time, you could do it at different tempi, so slower, faster, right? You could do it at different times of day. You wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you could sit down and play it. You play it at 6 o'clock at night, you could sit down and play it as well, right? So owning your accompaniment is super important. Whatever that accompaniment is, and I suggest that you start simple, right? We're going to talk about that. But whatever the accompaniment is, make sure you own the accompaniment. And if you find that when you sit down and you're trying to improvise hands together, it doesn't work, I can tell you from past experience, 95% of the time, that's because the accompaniment is holding you back. Remember, the accompaniment, you can't be thinking about it. Now, let me give you a great little exercise to practice. One great exercise to practice is either count or say your alphabet, or just say something, right? So I like to just, count to 20 or whatever. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, right? I can move to different chords. You can just also talk. You should be able to carry on a conversation and be able to keep something going. Again, don't get micro-focused on that accompaniment. That's just one of thousands of accompaniments, right? So whatever you're doing, if you're doing like a rock thing, like Let It Be, right? Make sure that you can play that accompaniment while you're, saying something, talking. But if you find out saying the alphabet or saying your numbers or having a conversation, that falls apart, well, there you go. That lets you know that you don't really know your accompaniment. You also have to own the form Most of the time, where students kind of like the bottom falls out for them is that they don't know the form of the song. So now we're going to dive into these details a little bit more in our classes starting mid-September, but basically the form is the structure of the song, right? Without getting into too much nitty-gritty right now. That's the structure of your song. So if you're doing a 12-bar blues form, well, that's the 12 bars. That's the 12 measures. You need to know where you are in that 12 measures and know when you're coming back up to the top. If you lose the form, then your improvisation is going to get blown out of the water, right? And now, the other thing to remember is that losing the form happens to 100% of improvisers. 100%. There isn't anyone I've ever met in my entire life who is an improviser who has not at some point lost the form of the song. I say that so that you just kind of feel a little bit better, right? Don't like whip yourself like, oh, I lost the form. Well, work on it, but it's okay. It happens to the best of us. Accompaniment should not add physical tension to your body. So again, if I'm doing that blues thing, like, you see my shoulders up, I'm like really tense. If I'm holding tension while playing an accompaniment, then my right hand improvisation is going to suffer big time. So you got to make sure that that accompaniment, this kind of goes with number one, right? If you really know your accompaniment, as you know it better and better, you should start to feel relaxed. So when you're practicing your accompaniment by itself, right? Like practicing the accompaniment just solo, no right hand, just the left hand, be thinking about not only memorizing the notes, the rhythm, and all of that, but also think about starting to relax your body, right? So when you're practicing accompaniment, relax that body. It's going to make your improvisation flow in the right hand much, much better. All right, starting with simple patterns, right? So let's take something like this. This would be like a blues in C, okay? Now this is a triplet feel. Triplet, 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 triplet. I often refer to it as swing eighth notes, right? But the thing is, when playing those triplets over there, now if you're going to play eighth notes in the right hand, it's going to start to get a little bit difficult because you're playing threes over here while doing twos over there. So you're getting a 2 against 3 pattern going on. So when we talk about simplifying patterns, maybe you just go to quarter notes. Basic, simple, just 4 notes of the blues scale, right? Maybe I even use 3 notes of the blues scale. But a lot of times what will happen is a player will play, they'll play this and they'll be like, oh, I got that down, I can play that. And then it all falls apart. Whereas if I go simple, so if you find whatever accompaniment pattern you're playing, if you can play it on its own, right? But then as soon as you add the right hand to it, it all starts to fall apart. Well, see if you can simplify that accompaniment pattern. And notice what I did there in simplification. I didn't change the notes, I changed the rhythm. Now, maybe you're playing 4-note block chords. Maybe that's too much. Maybe you just do root 3 7s, right? Do something a little simpler. Maybe you just do shells. Especially in jazz improvisation, I always suggest to students start with those shells first. Why? Because you got a basic sound that you can improvise over the top of. You can always revert back to shells. So if somebody puts a piece of music in front of you with chord changes on it, you're like, yeah, what are those rootless chords and everything? If you're getting confused there, well, don't worry. Go back to your shells, right? And just play your shells. You can always add in more complex chords, right? But you can't fill in the time if you if you had a train wreck, right? If you're playing along and everything falls apart, well, you can't go back and fix that, right? Everything is moving forward. So start with shells, go through the form maybe 1 or 2 times. You're like, okay, I got this, and then maybe, oh, let me when I come to that C7 chord, I'm going to grab a rootless chord. Then you do that, right? But starting with those simple patterns is really, really important. And then also begin with simple forms. Now, one of the things that we're going to be working on, or you're going to see, is I'm going to be using just a simple 4-measure pattern from the blues. And all this is just the first 4 measures of the blues. So even though it's a 12-bar blues and we might think, bah, yeah, I can improvise over a 12-bar blues, of course, that's super simple, right? Well, guess what? It might not be that simple. You might lose the form. So instead, just try practicing 4 measures of the form. Then try doing 8 measures of the form. Then try doing the full 12 measures. If you're improvising over a jazz standard that has like an AABA form, and if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. But if you do, then maybe you improvise just over the B section for a little bit. Or maybe you just improvise over one A section, right? So what I've learned time and time again from students is that almost every student who comes through my studio and through my programs, one of the challenges they face is that they always want to bite off more than they can chew, right? They always think, oh, I'm going to improvise over the entire form of Autumn Leaves, and it falls apart, and then they get frustrated, and they're like, I can't do this. Every one of you can improvise. I guarantee it, right? I can get every one of you to improvise. Now, whether or not you're going to improvise like Bill Evans or Keith Jarrett or Chick Corea or whoever, that's going to be up to you and your practice schedule, right? But everybody can improvise. But what unfortunately happens is students try taking on too much and then they simply say, no, I can't improvise. All right, so those are your 5 different action items for accompaniment. Now, let me give you some lesson suggestions, resource suggestions, all right? All of the resource suggestions, lesson suggestions that I'm going to give to you are all found on the Jazz Edge Academy website. I will talk about my Jazz Edge website a little bit later. I do have multiple websites. I know that gets some students upset, but I have multiple websites for different needs and for different price points. JazzEdge.com has AI built into it, and it's also our lowest price membership, right? Whereas Jazz Edge Academy, that's our big membership that has everything in it, right? So Jazz Edge Academy includes just so much material, you'll never be at a loss of what to practice. All right, so all of this can be found in Jazz Edge Academy, okay? The first one is the Confident Improviser. I say start with levels 1 through 10, right? There are 39 levels on the Confident Improviser. So more than enough room to grow there, and it goes through improvisation and jazz, blues, rock, pop, funk, all of that, right? That is a lesson collection, or what you might think of as a course, okay? So in the site, you will see that we have lessons and we have lesson collections, right? So if you're in the Academy search, you'll see that you have this lesson collection, right? So that's there, or these are just lessons which you could search for right in the lesson box. All right, so the Confident Improviser, great. Learn jazz piano, the basics. That is a lesson. That is a fantastic lesson. It's the Ben's Blues lesson. This is where you end up learning this bass line, these chords, and then improv. Don't get scared off. I know I'm playing faster. We're just doing that for time's sake, right? So you don't have to play that fast. All of this is broken down, nice and slow, step by step, with sheet music and all of that for you, right? So if you're watching this and be like, oh, he's just showing off. No. It's just for time's sake, okay? The No Bowl Guide to Jazz Piano, fantastic course right there. There's a beginner and an advanced, so if you're interested in learning more about jazz improvisation, those accompaniments in there are great, right? Standards by the dozen, again, this is where if you want to start to learn accompaniments over actual jazz and pop standards, check out that lesson collection. And then finally, the Jazz Edge practice curriculum. When it comes to learning your accompaniment, this stuff in the Jazz Edge practice curriculum is rock solid. You're going to learn all of your different chord types that you need and chord shapes. I just had a student, Gerben, write in, like, he loves the Jazz Edge practice curriculum. Like, sets up and starts his practice, knows exactly what to practice, boom, 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 mark it off. It's real super simple to go through that program. All right, so now, Part 2, right? Pillar number 2 is rhythm. This is the engine of all music and improvisation, right? This is where you turn your simple ideas into grooves that move and feel, right? This is your time, your syncopation, right? So rhythm, without rhythm, your improvisation is just flat. So if I do like, bleh, boring, right? What we want to hear. Right? We want some rhythm in there because rhythm is what moves, and that's what us as humans, we react so much to rhythm. All right, so action items for rhythm. Start with simple rhythms. Do your quarter notes, do your eighth notes, do your quarter and eighth note rest, right? Start with those simple rhythms first. I can't tell you again how much students want to jump into like 16th notes and triplets and all of that stuff, and they can't do it along with the accompaniment. It all falls apart. They get frustrated. I can't do this. You know the drill, right? We've been through this before. So make sure that you're really focusing on those simple rhythms first. The other thing is shift the starting beat, right? So I actually have some musical examples for each of these. Let's go through those right now. All right, so the first one here is this. Start with simple rhythms, right? So notice what I'm doing here is I'm just using quarter notes, eighth notes, half notes, whole notes, right? It's real simple, and a quarter rest in there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the iReal Pro track. Again, it's just these 4 chords, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them off to the side here, right? You don't need to worry about seeing them, right? We'll do that. And I'm just going to go ahead and, yeah, I'll do the pop rock, right? Last time. All right, so now again, that's not going to, blow the doors off of, you're not going to probably win a Grammy with that improvisation, but it's a simple way to start, right? Start with that simple rhythm first. Again, students try and play really complicated rhythms, and it ends up falling apart. So you see that the simple rhythms, it's a lot easier to line this up with that left hand. And also, notice what I'm doing here again in the left hand. It's the same thing. It's just simple left hand pattern. Root 3, 7. Here, I'm just playing the 7th, the 3rd, the 7th, the root, and the 3rd of the F7 chord, and going back to my C7 chord there. Oh, one thing I forgot to put in here is the chord symbols. So we know C7, F7, C7, C7, right? That's going to be the same for all of these examples. All right, so start with those simple rhythms. The next thing is try shifting the starting beat. So this is a good one. So you have this one right here. Now take a look at this one. You see what I did here? So let me scroll back and forth here. See here, I started on beat 1, and then here I started on beat 1 as well. But now on this, notice what I did. I shifted over, I started on beat 2 now, and here I started on the upbeat of beat 1, right? Now, I'm going to play the first one just one time for you, right? So you can hear that first one, and then I'm going to shift to the second one. Here's the first one. All right, here's the one with the shifted beat. So it's really interesting because what happens there is that you end up having different notes on your left-hand accompaniment, right? Whereas before, this was the E flat on the F, right? See the E flat right here on the F. Now we have this E flat down to C, then E flat, then up to F, right? So this whole thing just kind of shifted over. So shifting your starting beat is a great way of adding some life into your improvisation, right? So if you play a lick, right, let's say it's, right, or right, and you typically start that on beat 1, try starting it at, try starting on the upbeat, or start it on beat 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. right? So shifting that starting beat is a nice technique to work on and practice. Using syncopation, number 3. This is a great way of adding in some excitement into your improvisation, right? Syncopation, if we were to boil it down, is basically the alternation between downbeats and upbeats, right? Another way of looking at syncopation is think about where your phrases start. If they're always starting on a downbeat, right, versus starting on an upbeat, and then shifting back and forth between down and upbeats. If they're always starting on a downbeat, they're going to sound kind of flat after a while, right? They're going to sound very predictable that, oh, he always or she always starts on the downbeat when improvising, right? We know we're coming around to the beginning. Well, guess what? The lick is going to start on a downbeat. Whereas if you, rather than going bum, 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 you're like, ba, 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 ba. You start to add in some of that syncopation, it sounds a lot more interesting. All right, so what does that look like in music form? All right, so here, and I hope you're noticing, I'm using the same notes on all of this. All I'm doing is shifting around what's going on, right? So these first 3 examples use all the same notes. I'm not changing any of the notes here. So my raw ingredients that I'm using are the same. So here I have right? It's a basic, it's a minor change, it's a little change, right? But you could hear that it adds some kind of nice interest to this. I'm not going to bother to play with the iReal Pro here. Especially right in here, right? This really sounds cool right in there. Ba-dee ba, ba-dee ba-dee ba, ba-dee ba. Ba-dee-ba-dee-ba, right? This section right here, rather than starting with dee-ba-dee-ba, dee-ba-dee-ba, right? Rather than playing it right on the beat, it sounds a lot cooler when I add in some of those upbeats, but I have to make sure that I bring in the downbeats as well. So if I only do upbeats, I'm not going to feel the syncopation. The syncopation happens when we alternate between downbeats and upbeats. All right, next thing. Use quarter and eighth note triplets. These are fantastic rhythms that a lot of students just leave off of their playing. Let's take a listen to what that looks like and sounds like. So here I'm going to use these quarter note triplets. I'm just doing octaves. That's all that's going on there, right? And then I just a simple eighth note triplets right in here. Let's put on the iReal Pro and play with the backing track. Whoops. Fix that. Okay. Changed a little bit. Triplets. Quarter notes. Alright, so alternating and using both those quarter note and eighth note triplets, great way of adding some interest and excitement into your solo. Last action item. Grouping of accents. So this one is really cool, and I talk about this in some lessons, especially the funk improvisation series. And this is where you take a pattern, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take eighth notes. And you know how typically when we're taking a look and improvising using eighth notes, right? It would look kind of like this, right? A 4-note pattern, 4-note pattern, stuff like that. So now what we do is we could start to sequence and group together eighth notes into like a 3-note grouping. So that's what I did right here, right? And again, we're going to talk about this more in our improvisation classes, and you can see more of this in that funk improvisation collection as well. So here, all I'm doing is coming right down my blues scale, okay? But what I'm doing is I'm doing it in 3-note groupings. So I have this one right here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of put a little slur marking over it so you can kind of see the grouping, right? So each of these is a 3-note grouping. Oops, yikes. I don't know why I did that. Let me do that again real quick. Ba-bum. All right, you get the point, okay? You can see the 3-note grouping. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So right? So now let's put on, we can also just do this with a metronome as well. Let's do this. Let's Right? It might be easier to hear also on the with the band track. So let me add that. I'll put the band track on instead. I'm going to play these 8th notes straight. I'll explain why. Now I'm just going to go off here and just kind of play around with this. Right, so you can get some really neat sounds by utilizing these groupings. This is a more of an advanced concept in utilizing these groupings. But by utilizing some sequencing of notes, which again we'll explain in the class, right? But the sequencing of notes and those groupings and the accents, now you can get some really neat improvisation stuff going on, right? So now let me do this. Let me just go ahead and kind of go through, and I'm going to play each one of them in succession, okay? So let's go back over here. We're going to have all 5 of these, and I'm going to show you what it sounds like with all 5. Simple rhythms. Shifting. Using syncopation. Quarter note, 8th notes. One more time on that one. And then the groupings. So now, obviously, we want to build that into a solo, right? So these are exercises, right? But you practice these types of exercises over different forms and utilizing different ingredients and scales to make it so that then you could build up your solo from there. Right? So each one of these things you want to practice, and when practicing these things, I understand that it's a lot of times a little bit challenging, right? Because you're like wondering, well, what do I practice, and how much do I practice this, and then what do I do next? How do I know if I'm on track? That's what we're going to be dealing with in our fall classes, right? But this at least gives you some material that you can get started with so that you can start to do this on your own if you want. All right. Some lesson suggestions for rhythm. The Rhythm Essentials collection, right? Again, if you go into the site and you just see within the Academy search, your lesson collection, just pull down there and you can see all of these lesson collections right in there. Rhythm Essentials, hands down, that's where you should start. The Rhythm and Articulation lesson, great lesson as well for rhythm. Confident Improviser. We go through improvisation in the we go through rhythm in the Confident Improviser as well. The Demystifying Rhythms with Mike Marble. He had a great session, so he's a drummer. So if you want to actually like work on rhythm with an actual drummer, Mike has some great classes in there. And then finally, the Rock Rhythm Practice, volumes 1 and 2, Paul did another great lesson on rhythm. Now I said I was going to explain why I was playing those 8th notes straight versus swung. This is where rhythm shifts depending on what style of music you're playing, right? So when I play this pattern here, if I'm doing it with a pop rock feel, right, what you can see right here, I'm going to do that in more of a straight eighth feel. Listen to what happens if I try doing swung eighth notes over a pop rock feel. Right? It sounds a little bit hokey, right? It just doesn't jive with the groove. All right, so what I'll do is I'm going to play the swung eighth notes, but then I'm going to switch to straight eighth notes, and you'll hear how, like, oh yeah, the straight eighth notes really kind of lock in better. Swung. Straight. So depending on the style of music, you're going to change your eighth note pattern. It's either going to be straight or it's going to be swung. If you're playing like shuffle blues, you're playing jazz, you're playing R&B, that kind of stuff, that's probably where you're going to do more of that swung stuff, right? Whereas if you're doing rock, pop, Latin stuff, you know, obviously classical music, that's going to be more of a straight eighth note feel. Also in funk as well, you'll probably be doing more straight eighth notes. All of that we're going to cover as well in our fall classes. All right, so now let's move on to technique. So technique is a very short distance behind rhythm. So I said that rhythm is really the engine, okay? Technique is just as important as rhythm, okay? Because if you don't have the facility to play what you hear, what you think, what you feel, well, then game over, right? I could think like, oh, that's a great lick. This would be awesome to play. Like, you use this scale and these chords, and like, oh, I can hear it. I can feel it. But if you can't physically do it, well, then you can't physically do it, right? It's like having a novel in your head that you just don't know how to write, right? You don't know how to write words, right? You need that facility in order to be able to bring your ideas to life. So this is where you play what you hear with ease with technique. This is your articulation, your touch, and your control. So now, actions for technique. The first thing is focus on technique first in your practice. This right here, okay, is your gold for the day. So if you leave with nothing else than this concept, write this down. Start with technique first in your practice and do it for about a third of your practice time. I cannot tell you how many students get this wrong. So many students I talk to, it's like, oh, so what do you start with practice? Oh, well, I go through the songs that I know, you know, and I just kind of play around my repertoire. I'm like, all right, so you're basically playing stuff you already know. You're not like working on new stuff. Yeah, just to warm up. Here's the problem, you know, you start with something that you know to practice. Like maybe you say like, oh, I'm going to practice a few songs that I already know and do it for 10 or 15 minutes. How many times, honestly, by a raise of hands, you could raise your hand like just to yourself if you want, right, in your head. How many times you start that and then 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, you get a phone call or you get pulled away from the piano and then that's the extent of your practice for the day, right? You only ended up practicing, you know, a couple songs out of your repertoire because that's how you started your practice. Now turn this around. Let's say that you started your practice with some technical stuff right away, maybe going through all 12 major scales, going through your jazz edge practice curriculum, whatever it is, but you're doing technique and you're starting there. If you get pulled away from the instrument now 10, 15 minutes into your practice session, at least you practice your technique. The other important point about this is that when you keep your technique, like you keep your technique up, right? Everything else kind of follows along with that, right? So you might think, oh, well, my repertoire, I'm going to forget my repertoire. Yeah, you might forget your repertoire, but if your technique is solid and you keep your technique and you keep the facility in your fingers, then you're going to be much, much in a better position to be able to play that repertoire. Whereas if you let your technique slide, well, guess what? Now you're not going to have the physical ability to be able to play that repertoire and play what it is that you hear in your head. All right. Next thing. Oh, last thing I want to say about this, the 1/3 of your practice time. So if you practice for an hour, do 20 minutes on technique. If you practice for a half an hour, do 10 minutes on technique and start with that. And then hands down, the best place to go on that is the Jazz Edge practice curriculum right on the Jazz Edge Academy dashboard. All right. Use the grab technique. I have a great lesson on that's called Pain, Tension, and Technique. If you just do a search in the lessons for the word pain, all right, it will come up. This is the grab technique, and basically the grab technique, I go through it in that lesson, but rather than pushing down, you end up grabbing at notes. And I can tell you that this concept completely changed my playing. Right? I learned this concept in my 20s, and before that, I suffered from a lot of like carpal tunnel and repetitive use injuries because I would play really heavy because I never learned proper technique. But with that grab technique, it completely changed my piano technique. All right, so the grab technique, super, super powerful. Be sure that you're using a metronome or tracks, right? So you could use a metronome or you could use iReal Pro, Band in a Box, whatever it is you're doing, right? But make sure that you're using something to keep track of your time. A question I get asked a lot, do I have to use the metronome all of the time? Absolutely not, right? I'd say maybe you use it maybe half of the time. Just make sure that you're using it at least some of the time, and you're not one of those students that are like, I never practice with a metronome, or I don't need a metronome. Okay, yeah, well, guess what? We all do, right? So practicing with a metronome, super important. Now, this next point that I have here is play it on all beats and 2 and 4. So that means put your metronome on 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Okay, so that's your typical, right? What do we have here? Right? Right, so typical, right? We know that metronome and practicing like that, fine. But then we can also put the metronome on beats 2 and 4. And that's where we conceptualize our metronome as click, click, and that's not 1, 2, 3, 4. Instead it's 2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Right? And that gives you that jazz feel. Now, I have a great lesson on it, which I'm going to share with you in just a second on the metronome on 2 and 4 if you're interested in that technique. This one right here, oh man, speed equals light touch. I wish that I learned that one, probably 10 years, 15 years before I ended up learning it. But if you want to play fast, you need to play light, okay? It's that simple. If you're trying to you're not going to be able to do it. Whereas it... Right? You gotta play light in order to be able to play fast. If you're really thinking of a downward, energy flow in the keyboard, then it's going to be very difficult for you to play fast. Let's talk about that just real quick, right? Downward energy flow. What in the world is Willie talking about? So if I'm thinking that when I play, my energy goes down in the keys, versus grabbing and pulling toward me, that downward energy is going to make me kind of sink into each of the keys, and it's going to be like stepping in mud, right? And I got to kind of lift my leg up each step to be able to get to the next step. Whereas if I'm kind of like grabbing at those notes, now it's more like kind of sprinting, right? It's kind of like jogging across the mud, right? Makes it so I can kind of like light touch, So thinking about that speed equals light touch really changes your whole concept of playing fast. So when you're playing faster, take a deep breath. got to get the breath in, right? So make sure you're breathing. Get that nice big breath. Fill up those lungs and then relax and just focus on playing light, right? And it's that grabbing technique that's grabbing at those keys. And you're supporting that with your shoulders, your back, all of that, but doing it in a way in which you are not holding tension. And then finally, the last thing is pay attention to the entire body. I can't tell you how many times I've held tension in my own body. Like one thing that I would do is you can't really see, but my knee is right here, right? I push up, right? You can kind of see the keyboard moving. I would push up on the keyboard and hold tension there and not even realize it, right? I'd just be holding this tension in my body, or maybe I'm like over, whatever it is, shoulders up. So pay attention and make sure you're not holding tension in your body. It's a lot more difficult to realize that than you might know, all right? One great way of seeing that is set up a camera, right? And shoot video of yourself just for yourself, right? It's not anything you're going to post, but just take a look at it afterwards, especially from the side. You can see if I'm like... Right, you'll be able to easily see from that side camera, like, yikes, what are you doing there, Willie? That's way too tense, right? So paying attention to what's going on in your body is going to help you be able to play faster. All right, some good resources to check out. Jazz Edge Practice Curriculum, hands down, right? Just that's it, right? You want to work on technique, do Jazz Edge Practice Curriculum. You will have months and months and months and months of material to work on. Chord Essentials, another great one. Chord Essentials is great because you end up learning these different chordal patterns in 12 keys. You have 10 different styles. You end up learning them in 12 keys, right? So it's great if you want to work on your technique, but it's also great to learn different styles, different rhythms, and different accompaniment patterns as well. Piano Accompaniment Essentials, another one in which there's 15 lessons there that are really great in terms of diving into different accompaniment patterns, rhythms, chord patterns as well, right? All of these are, Jazz Edge Practice Curriculum, like I said before, is on the dashboard. Chord Essentials is a lesson collection, a course, and Piano Accompaniment Essentials is also a lesson collection. Technique Builder Bootcamp is another lesson collection as well, and that's where we go through all 12, all 12 of our scales, different chords, all of that. And then finally, that metronome on 2 and 4, that is a lesson. You could just do a search for that in the lesson area, and that's great, right? So if you want to dive in a metronome on 2 and 4, that lesson, it's a live lesson that was recorded. Check that out, and then that will tell you exactly what you need to focus on. All right, now, scales. This is the fourth pillar. I like to think of scales as my ingredients, right? This is using the right sounds the right way. This is your tone colors, your shapes, right? And then we have certain scales that work over certain chords and stuff like that, right? So really knowing your scales and knowing the right scales, right? And knowing how to interpret and play with those scales and be musical with those scales, super important. All right, so start with all 12 major scales. This is an absolute must, okay? I've heard students before say, oh, I don't practice my major scales. I know them already. Trust me, you can always be working on your major scales, and I will show you some different ways in which you can play around with that, right? Your major scales, that's where all of your chords are built off of. This is where your modes are built off of. This is where other scales are built off of. This is how you figure out all of your tensions. This is how you figure out all of your theory, right? I'm telling you, if you do not know your major scales, right, you are going to be completely stymied in your piano playing. Right? So if you have the idea that, okay, I want to be the type of piano player that knows how to not just, pick up a real book and play like an arrangement, but I know how to actually make intros and endings. I know how to do reharmonization. I know how to improvise. I know how to create my own stuff. All of that stuff, major scales is an absolute must. Okay? Next thing, master your 8 scales in 12 keys. Notice there is an asterisk right here. I will explain what the 8 scales are in just a second, but that asterisk is there because this is not a must. right? So this is a great thing to do if you have the time to do it and you have the interest in doing it. But for some students, you might want to focus on rock pop, and some of these 8 scales, you're not going to need to know all 8 scales in all 12 keys. Or you might say, hey, look, I'm 75, 80 years old, Willie. I'm just playing for my enjoyment. I'm not going to go out and gig, right? I'm not worried about doing any of that kind of stuff. Okay, so then maybe you don't have to do stuff in all 12 keys. Major scales, yes. I don't care what age you are. Major scales, you need to know all 12 of them. All of your other scales, it's up to you. Right? These are your piano lessons, like I like to say. So you get to decide how deep, you want to go on that scale knowledge. All right, so your scale stuff here, let's get rid of this one. All right, so I have a great lesson called 8 Scales You Must Know for Improvisation. So we have the major pentatonic scale. We have the minor pentatonic scale. And you see that this is sheet music right from the lesson. It's all, obviously the lesson goes through all in detail how to play all this, but all your fingering and everything is all laid out for you as well. Your blues scale, obviously, right? Your altered scale, another great scale to know. Your half whole diminished, your whole half diminished, which is great for diminished chords, and then your whole tone scale, and then finally you have this Locrian natural 9 scale down here, which is, whoops, let's do that so you can, make it so you can see that. Well, anyway, I can't scroll down that far. All right, so anyway, your Locrian natural 9. All right, so these 8 scales, first question is, well, why these 8 scales? Well, the reason for these 8 scales is that when you know these 8 scales, that gives you a broad palette to work from. Are there other scales? Sure. I have students sometimes, they're the engineer types. They're like very technical, and they're like, well, I saw on the internet that there's this like fallopian scale, and it's like, I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about. I mean, can you use the scale? Yeah, sure, you can use that, but you can overwhelm yourself, and you can add a lot of minutia practice into your practice routine, right? So be careful like what you're reading on the internet of all these alternate scales. Trust me when I tell you, major pentatonic, minor pentatonic, blues scale, major scale. Notice I didn't put the major scale in here because that's a no-brainer. We already talked about that in many other places. But half whole diminished, great scale to know. Altered scale, great scale to know as well. So mastering all 8 of those scales, really, really good. Paul also went through 5 scales that you need to know, so you could check out his 5 scales as well. I'm sure there's some overlap there. Right? The metronome is essential for scale practice. So again, metronome, backing track, whatever you want to do. Right? Practice in different hand combinations. All right, so what does that mean? Right? That means that, well, let me give you a cool little exercise that you can practice. Right? This is just an idea. Right? In fact, I came up with this idea this morning. I've never even tried doing this before. So typically, we would play a C major scale, hands together, right? Then we might go up a half step, do D flat, right? Then we might do D. Okay, and we go up and down, right? Typical major scale practice. But now check this out. I do the left hand C major scale, and as soon as I'm done, I go to D flat in the right hand. Then I go D in the left hand, then E flat, then E, then F. So what I did was I started with my C major scale here in the left hand, and then once I got up to the top, without skipping a beat, I went up a half step to D flat. And once I get to the end, without skipping a beat, I go up to D, but I come down here. Why don't I come up here? Because obviously I'm going to run out of room. It would sound like this. So I can do that, but obviously I'm only going to be able to do so many scales there. But that's a cool thing to practice as well, and then also doing that hand under technique. But the point here is that don't get like wound up on the minutia here. Instead, understand the concept. The concept is, rather than just like, all right, yeah, I'm practicing my scales, where like, yeah, sloppy is all get out. Who cares? But I practiced them. No, you didn't practice your scales. That's not good practice. That's garbage right there, right? And then even this. I can play all of my major scales. Okay, yeah, that's great, but you could play them like that, right? Can you play them in other ways? Like if I said, come down C major over here and then go up D flat. Right, even right there, I just messed up that fingering. Now I kept it going, right, without skipping a beat, but I messed up that finger and I hit my middle finger there rather than my fourth finger, right? And then come down. What you're likely going to find is doing stuff like that, you're going to get this. Right? You're going to get a brain freeze and it's going to make your brain hurt a little bit. And guess what, my friends? That's exactly what you're looking to do. You want to scramble your brain. Because as you do stuff over and over, especially when it comes to technique and scales and whatnot, when you're doing the same stuff over and over and over again, it's no different than going into the gym and lifting the same amount of weight. Oh, I do 10 pounds. Well, yeah, great. Yeah, you might get stronger. Or I do 20 pounds. Yeah, you might get stronger. But guess what? You're never going to get any more stronger, right? That even makes sense? Any stronger, right? So you get the point, right? So you got to kind of keep going up and challenging yourself in new ways in order to find that growth in your playing. All right, the last one, I love this. Going beyond scale practice, making music. So you could see when I was doing that other exercise here, I'm still playing a scale, right? I might go up and then do the right hand, the left hand. I'm kind of like flowing between the hands. And that was just a couple of different examples right there, right? Another example that I like, I'll share this one with you as well, is do scales in an interval, right? Now, obviously, you're not going to play them on top of each other. So if I say do like go a whole step above, right? So I might start with C here and then I'll do D here. Or E flat. Oops. Oh, jeez. All right, so here I'm playing E flat major scale down here, F major scale right there. Sounds good, huh? All right, the seconds don't sound great, but move that to a third. So I play E flat in the left hand, and I play G major in the right hand. What about a fourth? Okay, so what I'm saying, to be clear, I'm playing an E flat major scale down here. I am not starting my E flat major scale on a different note. I am playing a different scale. So I'm playing the A flat major scale. Notice in the right hand, I'll hit that D flat, whereas over here, I'm going to hit D natural. So, okay. So playing those scales, starting on different intervals like that, is another cool technique, right? I don't want to overwhelm you with too many things, and then this is where in our classes, I'm going to give you specific exercises to work on and practice so that you're not overwhelmed with ideas. This session right here, I know not all of you are going to join me in my class, right, on improv. That's fine. I'm just throwing out as many ideas for you as possible. But if you find that you're the type of person where it's like, you know, like a kid in a candy store, you have all these ideas and you're like, hey, that was great, Willie, I learned a lot, but I ended up implementing nothing, well, then maybe that's where the class might be advantageous for you, right? Because it will kind of focus you in. More on that later. All right, so going beyond scale practice. This is where you start to use scales and you start to play around with scales and improvise with scales and be creative. So rather than playing a scale up and down, right, which you have to do. I'm not saying don't do that. Absolutely do that, right? You got to know them up and down like that. But what I am saying is, if that is the be-all and end-all, and 100% of your practice forever, well, then you're going to be great at playing that scale up and down. But when it comes to like, okay, here we are on a C chord, now improvise. Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. play that scale up and down. Yeah, who wants to hear a scale up and down, right? Nobody. But if you never ever practice adding some musicality to your scale, then how are you ever going to be able to improvise? So one great exercise to work on is do some kind of simple accompaniment down here. I'll just do this root 5 root, and then rather than just playing my scale up and down, try kind of come down a little bit, then go up, then go down, then go up. Like I don't have to go down or up the entire scale. I can. I could kind of do a drone. This is kind of like more of like a straight feel. I could do, you know, more of like a jazzy feel if I wanted to. Right? The point is that I might play an accompaniment or a chord or whatever, and I'm just kind of playing around with that scale in the right hand. But I'm staying within the scale. I'm still practicing that one scale, but I'm not just playing the scale up and down, right? Again, just to make sure we're on the same page, you got to know how to play that scale up and down, hands together, contrary motion, all the good stuff, right? You got to make sure you know how to do that, but also add this other stuff into your practice because it's going to make your scale practice much more musical. Here's another little trick for you, a little exercise you could practice. Try going up the scale in the left hand. I'll do a different scale. Let's do D. Right? So all I'm going to do is play the scale up and down, right? So D major scale, simple. And in the right hand, I'm going to improvise over the D major scale. And I'm only going to use the notes of the D major scale in my right hand. And I'm not just going to start on D. I'm going to play around. Right? So you see I'm playing the scale up and down, right? Not changing the scale over there, but in the right hand I play around and I improvise, right? Doesn't have to be straight like that. Right? So again, all D major scale in the right hand, all D major scale in the left hand. I'm just going up and down in the left hand. Why? Because it makes it a lot easier for you to stay focused on the right hand stuff. If you start improvising around on both hands, which you can try that as well, it's just obviously going to be much more challenging. All right, so some lesson suggestions for scales. 8 scales you must know for improv. We've already talked about that. Jazz Edge Practice Curriculum goes through all the scales you need right in there. Technique Builder Bootcamp, another great one. Improvisation Essentials, right? There's an advanced lesson on that. Goes through some scale work. And then finally, your essential scale tricks. This lesson, number 5, is really cool. And one thing I love about this lesson is that in this lesson, I show you how to create scales from chords. So if you have like, oh, I got a D7 chord with a flat 9, I show you how to get to the scale that's going to work, how to find the notes of the scale that are going to work. You might not know the name of the scale, but you're going to know how to find notes, scale notes, that are going to work with that chord. Number 5, that lesson I think is really fantastic if you want to work on improvisation, because a lot of times you're going to come across a chord and you're not going to know, like, well, what scale can I use over that chord? Well, with this lesson, you're going to learn the techniques that you need to be able to figure out the scale on the fly. You might not know the name of the scale. That's okay. But it kind of like in that Nike fashion of just do it. Well, guess what? I'd rather you know how to do some improvisation than being able to like, well, let me tell you the scale, right? Rather than getting all technical and theoretical on, well, the scale is this and this is why. If you can at least play notes that are going to work in an improvisation, then I say that's a home run. All right, last one, expression. So expression when it comes to improvisation, I mean, again, we know that if your improvisation is expressionless, then you're going to sound like this. It's going to be very boring. No one's going to want to listen to your improvisation, right? So even when talking about improvisation, you probably see right now I'm animated, like, you know, like I'm like, yeah. You could tell I'm excited about improvisation and music because I love this aspect of music. Well, that's the same thing with improvisation, right? That excitement of me right now, this passion, sharing these ideas with you, that's the same thing when it comes to you improvising. That's your expression. That's your passion coming out in the notes. But the problem is, I could be animated, like, yeah, jazz, right? I could do all that, but how do I do that at the piano, right? So that's where my phrasing, my space, my storytelling, you know, like this is how I make my solos say something, is through my expression. All right, so let's get in some nitty-gritty on this. Pay attention to the basics, right? Loud, soft, short, long, right? So when you're improvising on stuff, getting that expressive range of dynamics, right? Like going from loud to soft, and like playing short, long. Like even if I'm doing a ballad. Right? So thinking about those basics of, am I playing loud, am I playing soft, am I playing short, am I playing long, that's a great way of focusing and getting your improvisation to another level. So how do I do that? Well, let's just take, again, that very simple, you know, 4-measure pattern. This time we'll switch over to, we'll change this over to a medium swing, okay? And then let's also, just for time's sake, so we have time for questions, let's move this up to, we'll take it up to 120, right? Make it a little bit more medium. Focusing on soft. Maybe now loud. Right? Playing long. Legato. Now playing staccato. Combining them together, loud and staccato. Short and staccato. All right, so what I would suggest you do is that when you practice something, practice like, you know, a section, maybe the whole blues, depending on your level. If you're more beginner, then just do a few measures. If you're more advanced, and try a full form. But take each of these concepts and individually try playing loud, try playing soft, try playing short. That's really legato, right? I'm sorry, that's really staccato, and long is legato, right? So I should have said legato and staccato, but I don't want to get too technical for you, right? But playing legato versus staccato, right? Short and detached versus smooth and connected, right? So taking each of those concepts and playing over your accompaniment, that's a great way of working on your expressiveness. And then notice how you could start to combine those together as well. Next one, use dynamics within the lick, the run, the line, right? So a lot of times students forget about this. So let's take this again. Notice, take a listen to dynamics. Listen to that again. how I started kind of loud and I went soft? Started soft, went loud, and then went back to soft. Right? So notice when I'm improvising a line there, a lick, a run, whatever, I'm not playing it all flat at the same volume, right? I might shift that volume. Think of your dynamics, right, as fast, slow with the pull, right? So if you want to play, if you want to play loud, don't think it's like a push down harder. No, it's pulling faster, right? So think of that push-pull, think of that pull technique, that grab technique when thinking about your dynamics. This one's great. When I was at Berkeley, I had an improvisation class with the great Hal Crook, trombone player. Look him up. Has some great books on improvisation if you're interested. But one of the best concepts that he taught me in his class was waiting until your X number urge to play. So wait until your second urge, your third urge, your fourth urge. What does that mean? All right, so again, if I put this on here, iReal Pro, right? I'm gonna have an urge to play like, oh, I wanna play. No, now I wanna play. Oh, no, what about now? Yeah, all right, cool. Now I wanna play again. Let me wait. Right? So the point is this. You're trying to add space into your solo. Now you can do this in some very specific ways, like do a measure of improv and then a measure of space, or 2 measures of improv, 2 measures of space, right? Or use the Hal Crook technique here and just simply, rather than having it very line like spelled out for you, instead do a little bit more free form with it and improvise around a little bit more, and simply say, okay, I'm going to improvise, but then I'm going to put in some space, and then I want to come back in and play some more. Now I'm going to wait. I want to play now. Now I'm going to wait. Now let me go ahead and play. Right? And again, we'll talk about this more in the class. And then finally, use range and density to build your solo. All right? And I say solo story because your solo should be a story. It should be telling something. If you're just out there and all you want to do is this, yeah! Right? Way too much, right? Instead, you want to tell a story. So you're looking to tell that story, and one of the ways you could tell that story is by thinking about that range and density, right? So you notice how I might go up and then kind of come down. You notice I might go from single notes to more like octaves, right? I might like kind of use my left hand as... So notice how I'm playing the same rhythm in the left hand. So I'm like really building up that density of notes that I am playing. All right, so lesson suggestions. Faster fingers. There's volume 1, 2, 3, 4, but obviously start with volume 1. Great series. There's some really cool exercises in that faster fingers lesson series. Get faster at the piano. That's a lesson collection, right? So that one would be good. Paying attention and technique. We've already talked about that one. And then a great lesson to check out is the 7 Days of Improvisation. That's great for beginners because it has some very basic level improvisation, but it's just a nice way of like just kind of improvising around for a bunch, right? Just gives you some great stuff to be able to improvise around the piano. All right, so do you want to crush improv this year? All right, so Well, let's talk about the classes and what's going to be going on with the classes, and then we're going to open up for your questions. All right, so there are going to be two levels of classes. There is going to be a beginner class and then an advanced class. In the beginner class, it's great for absolute beginners, right? You'll see when these classes are beginning. September 22nd is when the beginner class starts. The advanced class starts on September 29th. The classes are all on Mondays at 4 p.m. Eastern, and they switch every 2 weeks, right? So beginner is the 22nd. Advanced is the 29th, the following week is the beginner, the following week is advanced. It keeps going, switching back and forth, all right? This is going to go all fall long, all right, into, well, I don't know if we're going to get actually to the winter, December 21st, but we're going to probably get into December with these classes. Beginner class, great for absolute beginners, right? You'll learn the basics, right? I'm going to give you all the exercises. These are live classes. So you'll be able to interact with me. I'm going to give you information to work on, but then it's really going to be opening up and talking about, okay, so, what are you working on? Who has questions? Who needs help? Right? You're able to go at your own pace. Everything will be recorded. Okay? So all the classes are recorded, so you don't have to worry if you can't join at the class time, right? And then you can jump in and out at any time. Right? So a lot of times students are like, oh, yeah, I'd like to do this class, but I'm going to be traveling for a week in October or November, and it's going to get busy, and I'm not going to have time to devote. I'm telling you, I've heard it all before, right? And I'll tell you this, is that if you're waiting for the right time, that right time will never show up. Right? So you really want to just kind of, if you want to learn improvisation, at some point you're just going to simply say, hey, look, I'm going to do this. Like I said, everything is recorded. So if you miss a class, well, just check out the recording. Studio level membership for the beginner class. Premier level membership is required for the advanced class. The advanced class, this is where we're going to move outside of playing just your pentatonic and blues scale, right? You're going to learn more of those advanced concepts that we talked about today. I'm also going to give you accountability and action items, right? So my advanced level class, that's where it's going to be a little bit more like, I'm going to be expecting more from my premier level members, all right? And again, you're welcome to jump in and out at any time. So just like this, if the class is at 4 and all you could do is 15 minutes, then fine, just do 15 minutes. You could check out the recording, right? These questions or comments actually came in to our email, right? So I just wanted to highlight 3 of these. The first time, it's the time difference for Australia, 3 a.m. for me. I completely get it, right? My schedule conflicts with yours. Well, again, like I said, everything is recorded. Don't get hung up on the idea that, well, I can't join in on that live class, right? Unfortunately, I wish that we could be doing this 24 hours a day live. I would love to, but we can't, right? So I can't do a 3 a.m. class over here so that it works for Australia, because you're not going to get the best of Willie Mayette at 3 a.m. So remember, everything is recorded. This one, even as a retired individual, it's challenging to set the time aside to commit. I forget who said this, and with all due respect, I completely get it, but I also call baloney. All right, sorry, but I need to be real with you in order for me to help you get to where you want to be with your piano playing. If everything is like, oh, that's great, right? And then like, oh, everything's wonderful, then you're not going to really be able to progress. I'm telling you, you could do 5 minutes a day. You could do 10 minutes a day. You could do 15 minutes a day. And if you're a retired individual and you can't take 5, 10, 15 minutes a day, well, maybe that's, maybe you got to reassess what you're spending your time on, right? And then also you got to reassess how important is the instrument to you, right? So the point is, you don't have to invest hours and hours and hours a week, right? Like I've said many, many times, 5 days a week, 30 minutes a day. That is going to give you some real solid momentum. If you can't do that, do 3 days a week for 15 minutes. All right, that'll at least get you going. You can learn something in there. Or even 5 minutes a day every day. Point is, you can all do it. Right? The time, the time argument is a non-argument, because all of us can say that about anything. Well, I just don't have the time. I don't have the time. No, it's that you're not budgeting the time. So think about that. last. Still trying to get myself to play just basic stuff. I can't use both hands. I'm not ready for improvisation. I say that's the perfect time to work on improvisation. Because if you're waiting until like I could play both hands, well, first of all, what exactly does that even mean, play both hands? That's going to be different for everyone. And I can guarantee you that if everything is broken down the right way, which it will be in those beginner level classes, you will be able to play hands together. And in fact, you will likely find that these improvisation exercises that I'm going to give you are going to help you play other stuff better hands together. It's going to help improve your two-hand technique. All right. So anyway, just wanted to share with you some of these challenges. I say real challenges, but we should X that out because these are not real challenges. Okay. These are made up challenges that we tell ourselves. And I get it. I'm not blaming anyone and I'm not upset at anyone, but just know that all of these challenges are not actual challenges. Finally, last thing I want to share with you before we open up for questions is we have a special webinar offer. All right. So we are moving to a new membership billing platform, right? The platform that we've been using for well over a decade is just getting a little long in the tooth. So we're moving to something that's a little bit more modern and allows us to do some cool things like this. Save 50% off your first month of a studio or premier level membership. You can scan that QR code. It will take you right to that page, but you can also just come to it. It's jazzedge.academy/special, right? So that's 50% off your first month of your membership. This is only applies to monthly memberships right now. We will have other specials as we go, but monthly memberships, you could save 50% off your first month. If you're already a member now, a monthly member of either Studio or Academy, and you want to take advantage of this, because everybody can take advantage of this special. You could take advantage of this as well. Just note that we can't prorate monthly memberships, all right? So that means that today is what, September 3rd. Let's say your membership does not renew until September 15th and you order today. Well, we can't prorate those 12 days. But if you're saving 50%, well, that also helps as well. This special, you'll see it on the page as well, the special savings ends on September 21st. What that means is that if you're interested in taking advantage of the sale, you have to do it before September 21st because at the end of that day, the coupon will not work anymore. All right, so with that, question and answer time. All right, so I'm going to give you about 15 minutes right now for questions. All right, you hung with me up until now. So if you have any questions, this is the time to go ahead and unmute yourself. If you're on YouTube, you happen to be joining me, you can write in your question there. But does anybody have a question? All right, Tom, go ahead. You can.
Yes. So I play in a big band, a swing band, and occasionally what happens is I'm playing a big piece and it has a solo and it says playing a Glenn Miller style. And invariably it comes out rock or blues or something.
Okay.
And I was looking through my book to try to find which piece. It's not In the Mood. It's not String of Pearls. It's one of those faster swing kind of things. But your comments on that, maybe what course might be best or something along those lines.
Yeah, well, again, that's probably where I would go into the standards by the dozen because there's an improvisation section on each of the standards. So we go through Days of Wine and Roses, Autumn Leaves, I forget all of them, but there's a lot of great standards in there, both swing standards as well as ballad standards, as well as, you know, like kind of more rock pop standards. I did 12 of them. Paul did 12 of them. He skewed more of the rock pop. I did more of the jazz blues. So within there, you got 24 different tunes that you can work through your improvisation on. All right. Now, my 12, the first 12, I followed a very specific format in which you went through. You learned the melody, you did the melody with chord shells, you did the melody with rootless chords, we did a bass line, we did two-handed comping, which might be helpful for you, and we also did improvisation. So I think for you, Tom, I would suggest that you take a look at that course. That's Standards by the Dozen. Again, if you go into the lesson collections, right here, and if you just scroll all the way down to Standards by the Dozen, you'll find it right in there. Okay. And the other thing is the Confident Improviser. That would be another great one to check out as well.
All right, thank you.
You got it. Anyone else? And you don't have to worry about raising your hand. Melanie, just go ahead and unmute yourself. And if you don't mind, just do me a favor and say your first name and then what your question is. So go ahead, Melanie.
All right. Yeah, I'm Melanie. So this was about a piano improvisation. So, but sometimes we play with an organ sound or synthesizer sound. Is that completely different?
No, not at all. In fact, if I go back over here, it's going to sound better if I use like kind of like a rock sound on this. Don't kill me for this. All right. First of all, the virtual keyboard is messed up on the organ patch here, but I'm just going to play like an organ patch here for you. Right, so playing short, right? Now, as far as the dynamics go, I can't do any dynamics, but typically on an organ, I would have like an expression pedal in which I could swell, right? So all of these concepts, improvisation-wise, are there's really no difference or very, very subtle differences depending on the patch. Typically, the patch, the sound, the tone, the timbre, right, whatever you're working with, whether it be a Rhodes, a clavinet, stuff like that, you'll end up tweaking how you'll improvise. Like, for instance, here's a clavinet. All right, so now let's go ahead and improvise over here. Now, typically, you probably wouldn't improvise over this pattern. You know, like, or I'm sorry, you probably wouldn't improvise. Well, actually, no, I shouldn't even say that. Anyway, let me play with the clavinet. Now, I'm probably not going to do something like this. It's going to sound weird. Honest with you, it actually didn't sound all that bad. But typically, like a clavinet sound, you're probably not going to be playing like that single line with chords in the left hand. A traditional clavinet, it probably wouldn't sound as good as that, right? So the point is that when you're improvising, when you're playing in a different patch, right? Clavinet, Rhodes, organ, yes, that's going to change some of what you do with your improvisation. But the ultimate fundamentals that we're talking about, they're all the same. All right, let's see, who else we got here? We got some in chat. Let me take a look at the chat here. Somebody, whoops. Question, oh, Tom, okay, Glenn Miller. Virgil, does JPC have all 8 scales and all 12 keys? I don't know if we've gone through all 8 of those scales, but eventually JPC is not done. I keep adding, so I will be going through all 8 of those scales at some point, Virgil. All right, but the major pentatonic, minor pentatonic, blues scale, Mixolydian scale, like all of that stuff, that's already in JPC in all 12 keys. All right, so Frederick, great overview on the topic. Thanks and greetings from Austria. Michael, what is JPC? All right, so JPC is the Jazz Edge Practice Curriculum. All right, so when you go to your dashboard on the site, right over here on the right-hand side, you're going to see Jazz Edge Practice Curriculum. And we're going to be doing a dashboard refresh, so you're going to see this change around a little bit. But if I click on this Continue JPC, it's going to take me into the Jazz Edge Practice Curriculum area. And now, what's great about Jazz Edge Practice Curriculum is that you see all of these, let's see, where can I see it? Oh yeah, View Full Curriculum. So I know it's hard to read, but let me just read some of this to you. Play the major scale, each hand, 1 octave with proper technique and fingering. Number 2, play the major scale hands together, 1 octave with proper technique and fingering. Number 3, play the major scale hands together 2 octaves in eighth notes. Let's keep going here. Number 11, play 3-6-2-5-1 progression. Number 15, play minor 7 flat 5 in all inversions. Number 17, play chromatic scale hands together. All right, so basically what the Jazz Edge practice curriculum is this is where I've put together in a very step-by-step fashion for you all of the technique that I think that you need to know. Right? And we go through in all 12 keys. And we don't do it around the circle of fifths. We don't do it chromatically. We have our own special pattern here that we follow, because I found that when students just do circle of fifths, circle of fourths, they get locked into these patterns. So I started with some easy keys and we move into harder keys, right? But we kind of spread it out so you're not just moving from easy keys then to all hard keys, right? So in the practice curriculum, you'll see that it's very simple, right? So this is where I left off. This is focus 1.40. It's the key of F. This is a suggested tempo of 100 beats per minute, sheet music. I can click here to download. And in my instructions, very simple. Play the major scale, 2 octaves, right hand, and 1 octave left hand with contrary motion. I can go ahead and play the video. And the beauty is when you play this video, you're going to notice that the videos are not long. 1 minute, 55 seconds. So one thing that I specifically do in this Jazz Edge practice curriculum is I make sure that all of these videos are short and to the point. There's not 90 minutes of content here. It's 2, 3, maybe 4 minutes of content max, right? So it allows you to get right into it and then get right to what it is you need to practice. You go ahead and mark it complete, and then you can see everything that you've marked complete, all these little green play buttons. And the beauty is if you want to go back and watch one of these videos again, I know it's kind of hard to see, but if I click on one of those little buttons, it will take me back to that Jazz Edge practice curriculum, and I can go and watch that video again. So it's not like when I move forward, I can never go back and watch those videos again. I can watch the videos again. I can also download all of that sheet music along the way. The other thing we do as well is you can also submit for some feedback as well. So you see some teacher feedback right here. Okay, great. I would suggest now you play with a metronome, keep the time steady, keep up the great work. Okay, so that's your Jazz Edge practice curriculum. Students love the Jazz Edge practice curriculum because you just get right in and you know exactly what to practice. And again, like I said, if that's all that you practice, well, guess what? That's a great practice session right there. You do 10, 15, 20 minutes of Jazz Edge practice curriculum stuff, you could set aside your practice and feel good that you practice something that's meaty and it's going to actually help you down the road. Anybody else? Any other questions? Just go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question, or you can type in it in the chat.
Hi, can I have a question?
Hey, Miyuki, how you doing? Go ahead.
Hi. So I'm trying to doing my left hand steady, and then I play like the improvisation you give, and then I try to do my own, and sounds terrible, but it's my own. I think you always tell me try to do my own instead of copying. So I do, and I feel it's kind of terrible, but good thing is I did it, like, syncopation, and then I play. Still, is that good practice?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Like when it comes to improv, you're always going to be your own worst critic, right? You're going to think your improvisation is terrible. I think my improvisation is terrible, but I don't say it. I just kind of just try and work on it and get better at it, Okay. So like everything, right? I mean, the thing that we got to remember is think about correlations. So think about what about language, right? So, okay, I think I could speak pretty well, but am I the best orator in the world? Well, no, right? So I would have to work at it, but
Right.
I could still do it, right?
Right.
Yeah, so there might be certain things that you work on, like, if you're giving a speech, it's like, well, then maybe you work on trying to avoid that. the thing is this, when you're trying to get better at your improvisation, where most students go wrong is they see like their improvisation and they see this whole bucket full of things that are wrong with their improvisation. There's this, there's that, there's this, there's that, there's this. All of this stuff is wrong. And the problem is you can't fix all of that stuff. You need to fix just one thing, right? Like you can't fix all of it at once. You need to fix one item at a time. And most students are not willing to focus in and say, hey, look, let me work on my eighth notes. Let me work on my chords. Let me work on my accompaniment. Let me work on one of these pillars, right? Instead, they're just like, either it's like, I want it to be perfect right now or forget it, you know? So you want to get a little bit more granular with your practice, you know? Put down the whip. It's okay if you don't like your improvisation. You're not going to like everything that you play. But if you play it and you say, like, I don't like it, go a little deeper, you know?
Right.
Like, figure out, well, what don't you like about it?
Right.
Because just being, like, vague, like, oh, I don't like it, well, how do you fix that, you know? Whereas if you say, I don't like that improvisation because it feels like I'm playing too many notes. Well, now you know what to work on. Right? Now work on playing a section and try doing more of the playing and resting, adding more space, right? Or I feel like when I improvise, I'm playing too heavy. Okay, play lighter, you know? But again, it's not just like I feel like I'm playing too heavy and it's like play lighter and then you just go back to the whole song. No, you take a small section. This is the other key. Breaking down complex items into smaller parts. It's very, very difficult for people to do that. That's where I come in. I help you break that down.
Right. So on the coaching session, I don't have to feel embarrassed. So this is what I play right now. I don't think it's so good, but I should still make a video and let everybody hear. That's a good lesson, I guess.
Absolutely. So the other thing about improvising, and really this is about playing music in general, the best way of getting better, okay, is to share.
Okay.
Yeah, it really, really is. So I can tell you for myself that I got better by playing out and playing in front of people, sharing, okay? So now you might not go and do a gig or a jam session at a nightclub. That's fine. But sharing your playing in a session like this is still sharing, right?
Okay.
So, yeah, super important, that sharing.
Okay. So be ready, everybody. I will say a lot of about improvisation.
Oh, I bet your improvisation is a lot better than you think, I'm sure.
Okay.
All right, I
Thank
got
you.
time for one more question if anyone has one more question. Otherwise, we're gonna wrap it up. All right. Frederick, what is your opinion about bebop scales or bebop language, as it is said that it is very important to get better at improvisation? Absolutely love it, right? There's some bebop scale stuff on the site. You can take a look at the Barry Harris stuff as well. So yeah, bebop scales are really good. I never really practiced like the strict bebop scales a lot, right? But not to say that they're not great. Now, in terms of like you need to like it's important to do bebop to get better at improvisation. Well, I would say that's absolutely 100% if you want to get better at bebop improvisation, right? So it is absolutely not required to play bebop, to listen to bebop, to like bebop, or even know what bebop is. So if you don't even know what bebop is, don't worry about it. You don't need bebop in order to improvise. Bebop is a specific style of jazz. So if you want to get better at that style, then yes, bringing in those bebop scales, those enclosures, and all of that is really good. We talk about those enclosures in the Jazz Edge practice curriculum as well, so there's some great exercises in there for not. And then finally, Richard wrote in, Premier members will or will not need to reserve places in the fall courses. You do not need to reserve your spot, right? Let me just show you this. So when you go to the event calendar, okay, let me just pull up the event calendar, you will see right here, right, the beginner improv and then the Improv Masterclass. I'm probably going to change those names. All right, you can see the little roll over there. It says Premiere, and if you see the little roll over there, it says Studio. Right, so let you know that that's a Premiere and that's a Studio level. So all you would end up doing is literally just going into that event page, and then you would just simply go to join session. Right, no replay is available because there's no replay yet. All right, so you just join session, and if you want, you can add it to your calendar or iCal as well, and this lets you know who's teaching it and what level it is. All right. All right, so anyway, with that, I want to thank you all for joining me. Like I said, the replay will be going out as soon as possible, but if you don't see it tonight, then you will see it tomorrow. So these classes will be starting up in just a couple of weeks. If you're interested in that special, scan that QR code, all right, and then you can get that 50% special, or just go to jazzedge.academy/special. With that said, I am really looking forward to this fall's improvisation. If you've always wanted to improvise or you're looking to get better at improvisation, I can guarantee you these classes are going to help. All right, so with that, thank you all very much for joining me, and I will see you very, very soon.